The camera panned across a dazzling global studio. LED lights pulsed behind gleaming desks, and flags of over 50 nations hung above, watching like silent witnesses. The host, barely keeping control, turned to Donald Trump, who sat stiff in a dark blue suit. Then it happened. Trump leaned forward, lips curled, voice cold and deliberate. "Captain Ibrahim Traoré is a rotting disease infecting Africa." The room froze. One cameraman gasped. A woman in the control room dropped her coffee. The world, watching live, blinked in disbelief. Traoré sat across from him, in his military uniform, hands calmly clasped. Not a flinch, not a twitch. Just silence. Then, slowly, he leaned toward the mic. His eyes didn't blink, didn't break. "No," he said, voice low but firm. "I am your downfall." The air snapped. Trump shifted uncomfortably. Even the host didn't know what to say. People across Africa, across the globe, sat up. Something real was happening, something raw, and the world had no idea what was coming next. In Ouagadougou, a small roadside vendor paused her cooking. She had heard it live on the radio, Trump's insult and Traoré's response. Tears stung her eyes as she stirred the pot. "He spoke for us," she whispered. In a classroom in Kenya, a teacher paused the lesson. "Children," she said softly, "today, we witnessed history." Across Senegal, Congo, Mali, young people replayed the clip on cheap phones. Some cried, some smiled. All felt something awaken. This wasn't just a political drama. This was a man standing tall for a continent long insulted, ignored, and underestimated. Meanwhile, inside the studio, the host stuttered. "Captain, what do you mean by that?" Traoré didn't rush. He looked directly at the camera, at the millions watching. Then he spoke. "For centuries, men like Trump have judged us. But now we are no longer begging at the gates of power. We are building our own." His voice was calm, unshaken. Trump folded his arms. "You're nothing but a rebel." Traoré didn't reply, but his silence burned louder than any scream, and the world leaned in, knowing something bigger had just been unleashed. Later that night, as Traoré sat quietly in his hotel room, the echo of Trump's insults still rang in his ears. But he didn't feel anger. He felt something deeper. He looked at the photo on the nightstand. His mother standing beside a clay house, her hands covered in flour, her face tired but proud. He remembered being 8, barefoot, walking 6 kilometers to school every day. He remembered the heat, the dust, and how his mother used to whisper, "You are not poor, you are in preparation." She died when he was 12. He had nothing but a uniform and her voice in his head. And now, in that studio, he hadn't just answered Trump. He had answered every man who ever spat on African dignity. He walked to the window and looked out over the lit city. He whispered, "Mama, they heard me today." Far away, a young boy in a refugee camp watched a replay on a cracked screen. He didn't know who Traoré was before today. But now, "I want to be like him," the boy said. And thousands silently agreed. Within an hour, the video had gone viral. Newsrooms from Dakar to DC scrambled to analyze it. Social media feeds flooded with hashtags like Jacques Traoré speaks and downfall moment. Inside a modest apartment in Johannesburg, an old liberation fighter named Teboho stared at the clip on his phone. He rewound it, again and again. "No, I'm your downfall." He didn't speak for several minutes. Then, with a shaking hand, he reached for a faded photo of his brother, who had died in exile fighting apartheid. "He would have loved this," he whispered. Across continents, something deeper than anger stirred. It was dignity, pride, a voice that didn't scream but still silenced giants. At the studio, Trump leaned back, caught off guard. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. The host tried to regain control. "Captain Traoré, do you believe the West has wronged Africa?" Traoré's eyes didn't move from the camera. "I believe. They fear a free Africa more than a broken one." The silence afterward. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Inside the control room, a young sound engineer named Amara had tears in her eyes. She hadn't cried at work before. She had seen plenty of fiery interviews. But this was different. She whispered. He didn't raise his voice once. Behind the glass, even the executive producer, a hardened veteran of live television, sat stunned. "Who is this man?" he muttered. One of the junior producers answered quietly. "He's the one they tried to silence. And now he has the mic." Meanwhile, Trump, still fuming, tried again. "You're defending chaos, coups, poverty. Your people are dying." Traoré finally looked at him, slowly, and said, "Our people are dying because of the games you've played for decades. Our children starve while your corporations grow fat. Don't talk to me about chaos when you created the fire." Trump's mouth opened. But the crowd, even those who once doubted Traoré, began to applaud. The applause grew, not loud, but deep, from the gut, from the pain, from the memory of being forgotten, and finally being seen. As the segment cut to a commercial, Traoré leaned back quietly in his chair. His hands reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. Worn. Old. It was a letter. Handwritten by a Burkina mother whose son had died in a gold mine collapse. She had written to him not for justice, but for peace of mind. "Tell the world we are not just dust and diamonds," the letter said. "Tell them we are people." Traoré carried it everywhere. He didn't need a speechwriter. That letter was enough. Trump glanced at him. "What's that?" he asked, smugly. Traoré didn't respond. He just folded it and placed it on the desk. "Read it," he said calmly. "If you dare." The cameras weren't even rolling. But everyone in the room knew. Something real had just been placed between them. Not words, not politics, but pain, truth, memory. And it was more powerful than any insult that could be thrown. The commercial break ended. The camera lights flicked back on. Trump sat stiff, the folded letter from Traoré untouched in front of him. He glanced at it, then pushed it aside. But the audience had seen it. The world had seen it. "What was in that letter?" the host asked. Traoré looked straight into the camera. "A mother who lost her only son in a mine built by foreign contracts," he said. "She didn't blame God. She didn't blame Burkina Faso. She blamed greed." Trump rolled his eyes. "Oh, please." But Traoré raised a hand gently. "Let me finish." For a moment, Trump was silent. "She asked me to carry her son's name, so I do. He is why I lead." The host swallowed hard. Backstage, even the crew had stopped whispering. A clip of a child in torn sandals flashed on screen. It was real, from a village where miners had died months ago. No music, no drama, just truth. And millions watching wiped away quiet tears. Outside the studio, a growing crowd had gathered. Some held signs, others held their phones high, watching the interview live through glass walls. One of them was a boy, no older than 13, wearing a faded t-shirt that read, "Africa is not poor. She's robbed." His name was Kosi. He had walked 3 miles to stand outside this building. He had no father. His mother had died 2 years ago in a hospital with no electricity during a power cut. He remembered holding her hand as she whispered, "Don't let them forget us." When he saw Traoré on the screen inside, he pressed his hand against the glass. "I know you don't know me," he whispered, "but I know you." That moment was captured by a photojournalist. The image of Kosi with his palm on the glass went viral in minutes. Inside the studio, Traoré saw the boy. He didn't wave. He just nodded. Slow, steady. A signal. I see you. That silent exchange spoke louder than the loudest speech ever could. Just as Traoré was about to respond to the host's next question, everything went black. Cameras died. Screens went blank. Lights snapped off. Gasps erupted inside the studio. Backstage, technicians shouted over failing monitors. The backup generator clicked but failed to fire up. "What's happening?" the host asked in panic. "Power cut," a staff member said. "But this building never loses power." And yet, it had. People across the world watching the live feed stared at frozen screens. Twitter exploded. Was it sabotage? A signal jam? A cover-up? But inside the studio, in the pitch dark, Traoré's voice spoke first. This is what millions of Africans live with every night. Silence. No mic. No lights. Just the sound of his voice in the blackness. "They talk about progress," he said softly. "Yet our hospitals still go dark. Our children still study by candlelight. Not because we failed, but because someone else profits when we do." Then a single backup bulb flickered on, and in that faint light, his face appeared. Calm, firm, unforgettable. It wasn't a failure. It became a moment of truth. While the studio tried to reboot the power, a phone buzzed in Traoré's jacket. He glanced at it. The screen flashed. State House, Ouagadougou. He excused himself from the studio set and answered it in a quiet hallway. It was his defense minister. "Sir, something is happening. American forces just landed near our northern border. No official communication. No explanation." Traoré closed his eyes. "They're provoking a reaction," he said calmly. "They want us to flinch." "But what do we do?" the minister asked, almost whispering. "We don't play chess with a lion that lost its teeth," Traoré said. "We protect our people. Peacefully. But with pride." He hung up. Outside the hallway window, the boy Kosi still stood, his hand now pressed tighter against the glass. A camera zoomed in on the moment. It went viral instantly. "Look," one tweet read, "he takes war calls in silence and still makes a child feel seen." This was no longer just a TV show. It was a global battle of stories, and Ibrahim Traoré's story was no longer just his own. Back in the studio, Trump was growing visibly nervous. He had insulted dozens of leaders before, and always won the room. But this time was different. The crowd wasn't cheering for him. They were just watching. Quiet, suspicious, awake. Traoré returned to his seat. "Sorry," he said calmly. "A border update. Things you may not understand." Trump smirked. "You think you're powerful because you wear a uniform?" Traoré looked at the host. "Can I tell a story?" The host nodded. "A week ago, I buried a soldier. His name was Emmanuel. 22. Quiet. Soft eyes. He once gave his food to villagers even when he hadn't eaten for 2 days." He paused. "He was killed by a drone meant for terrorists, but the drone came from allies we never asked for." The studio fell silent. Even Trump stopped moving. "I held his mother's hand," Traoré said. "She didn't cry. She just asked me, 'Will his death mean anything?' He turned to the camera. I told her yes. And this moment right now is part of that answer." Viewers across the world wiped their eyes, because suddenly it wasn't just politics anymore. It was personal. The host glanced at the desk. The letter from Chapter 6 still sat there, folded neatly. He pushed it toward Trump. "Mr. President, since you dismissed it earlier, would you be willing to read it now, on air?" Trump sneered. "I'm not here for emotional stunts." But the host didn't back down. "The people are watching. They deserve truth. The studio audience began to murmur. Finally, Trump grabbed the letter and unfolded it. He read aloud, "To whoever reads this, my name is Mariam. My son died under your machines. He worked for gold he never touched and food he never ate. But I still raised him to stand. Now I ask only one thing. Respect our dead. Stop calling us problems. We are people." Trump's hands trembled slightly. He tossed the letter down. Sad story, but irrelevant. Traoré leaned forward again. "It's not sad. It's sacred." Then he looked into the lens and said, "Mariam, if you're watching, I kept your letter, and I brought it to the world." Mariam was watching, in a rural village with no electricity, using a solar-powered radio and a neighbor's phone. And she wept. So did millions more. A new segment started in the studio. On the giant LED screen behind them, a satellite image of West Africa lit up. But this map was stripped of borders. No Burkina Faso, no Ghana, no Nigeria, just resource zones, copper, lithium, uranium, gold. "This," the host said, "is how the West sees Africa." Trump nodded confidently. "Exactly," he added. "These resources matter. If you want global respect, learn to compete." Traoré stood up. Silence. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You don't see people, just products, places to extract and leave behind." Then he pointed at a glowing red spot on the map. "That area is a village. My cousin died there trying to protect children during a raid by mercenaries you funded." The studio froze. He had no gun, just his voice, and your allies silenced it. Trump shifted uncomfortably. Across the world, people Googled the village's name, Ningen. Photos of a burned-out school and weeping families surfaced within minutes. And suddenly, the map wasn't glowing anymore. It was bleeding. Backstage, an advisor rushed into Trump's dressing room. "Sir," he whispered, "leaked documents are out. Emails from a defense contractor, confirming what Traoré just said." Trump's eyes widened. "What documents?" "On Twitter, everywhere. There's proof U.S. military aid funded armed groups near his borders. It's blowing up." Back in the studio, the host had no idea yet. But Traoré did. He'd received the intel days earlier from a whistleblower in Geneva, a woman whose brother had died in a drone strike gone wrong. She sent one message with the file. "He believed in what you're doing. Please, use this truth wisely." And Traoré had waited, patiently. Now the documents were public. Now the lie was broken. And now Trump was cornered. When the host turned back to him and said, "Mr. Trump, care to respond?" The former president simply said, "I won't dignify fake news." Traoré didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply looked into the lens and said, "To the families affected, I told you the world would see." And they did. The broadcast was scheduled to end in 2 minutes. But no one was cutting the cameras. Not the producers, not the sponsors, not even the networks. The world was watching, and for the first time, truly listening. Traoré leaned forward, voice calm but heavy with emotion. "Africa is not asking for pity. We are demanding respect. We are not your children. We are your mirror. And you don't like what you see." He paused, then added, "The truth is, it was never about helping us. It was about helping yourselves, until we realized we were enough." Trump interrupted, desperate now. "You think you're some kind of hero? You'll fall like the rest." But Traoré stared back, eyes firm. "No, I won't fall, because I don't stand on lies." And then, he reached into his pocket one last time and pulled out a tiny photo. It was Kosi, the orphan boy outside the glass, holding a sign that read, "I am not weak. I am Africa." Traoré held the photo up to the camera. "This is who I fight for." And across every continent, people cried, The host cleared his throat, trying to wrap up the interview. But the room refused to move. The studio audience sat still. The world was holding its breath. "Captain Traoré," the host said, voice low, "if you had one final message, to America, to the West, to the world, what would it be?" Traoré didn't answer right away. He stood, took a slow breath, then walked to the massive screen behind them. With a single swipe, the LED background changed. A black and white image filled the room, a child's grave in Burkina Faso, a wooden cross, a name carved by hand, Emmanuel Z. Traoré. "My nephew," he said softly, "killed in a raid by foreign-backed rebels." Trump turned his face away. Traoré continued, "You called me a disease. But I am not the one dropping bombs on children. I am not the one stealing gold while people starve. I am not the one rewriting history." He turned around slowly. "You are." And in that moment, Trump had no words left. Outside the studio, the streets of every African capital were flooded with people. From Bamako to Banjul, Nairobi to Niamey, millions gathered, holding candles, portraits of lost ones, or simple signs that read, "We are not weak." In Burkina Faso, old women sang under mango trees. Young boys climbed rooftops just to shout, "Traoré, Traoré." News anchors across Europe and America tried to spin it, but the internet had already chosen its truth. The world had seen the maps, the letters, the photo of Kosi, the grave of Emmanuel, and above all, the man who didn't scream, didn't beg, but simply stood and told the truth. Back in the studio, the host wiped his eyes. "I've interviewed presidents," he said quietly, "but I've never witnessed history." Then something unbelievable happened. Trump stood up. He didn't look at Traoré, he just walked out. The cameras didn't follow. They didn't have to, because the world's eyes were already fixed on one man, and that man didn't chase power. He stood for people. With the room silent, Traoré stepped toward the camera. Not to speak like a president, but like a brother. His eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. "To the mothers watching, who've buried sons in silence, I see you. To the fathers without land, who still wake up at 5 a.m. to try again, I honor you. To the children studying under streetlights, keep reading. The world is changing because you still believe." Then he held up one final item, a worn book, Thomas Sankora's speeches. He once said, "While revolutionaries as individuals can be murdered, you cannot kill ideas. Tonight, you saw why." Then he smiled gently. "I am not your disease. I am your mirror, and I will not be erased." The screen faded to black. But the tears? They kept falling. The comments exploded. If this story moved you, don't scroll. If you cried even once, let your heart speak, like this video. Tell us where you're watching from. Drop your tears in the comments. Share your story. Subscribe if you believe Africa deserves more than silence. Because this wasn't just a story. This was a revolution, told in truth.